Sunk cost fallacy. You're 2 hours into a movie you don't like, 30 minutes left, and something in you refuses to turn it off. Not because it's gotten better, because you've already spent 2 hours, and walking away now would mean admitting those 2 hours are gone for nothing. So you sit through 30 more minutes you also won't enjoy. That's the sunk cost fallacy, our tendency to keep pouring in time, money, or effort based on what we've already spent, rather than on what continuing is actually worth. Economically, it makes no sense. The 2 hours are gone either way. The only real question is whether the next 30 minutes are worth it on their own terms. But emotionally, quitting feels like loss, and continuing feels like protecting an investment that's already gone. This shows up in far bigger places than movies. In relationships people privately know aren't working. In careers people privately suspect they've outgrown. In projects everyone quietly agrees are sinking. What makes it different from commitment is direction. Real commitment looks forward toward the outcome you want. Sunk cost thinking looks backward toward a decision you already made. Most people spot this instantly in someone else's life. Almost nobody spots it in their own.
Halo effect. You meet someone conventionally attractive, and before they've said more than a sentence, you've already quietly decided they're probably smart, probably kind, probably good at their job. None of that has been demonstrated. You just assumed it, instantly, based on a trait that has nothing to do with any of it. That's the halo effect, a term coined by psychologist Edward Thorndike, and it describes how one shiny trait, usually appearance, bleeds into your judgment of everything else about a person. It's been measured everywhere once you know to look. Taller people get promoted more. Well-dressed strangers get trusted with directions faster. Attractive defendants get lighter sentences on average. Your brain likes a tidy story, so once it decides someone is good in one way, it goes hunting for evidence they're good in every way and quietly filters out anything that argues otherwise. What separates it from simply liking someone is timing. It happens before you actually know them, a shortcut standing in for information you don't have yet. The uncomfortable twist is that it runs in reverse, too. One off-putting first impression can shade someone's entire character in your head before they've had a fair chance to prove you wrong.
Anchoring bias. You see a jacket marked down from $300 to $120, and it feels like a steal, even though you have zero real idea whether $120 is actually fair for that jacket. The $300 did all the work before you even noticed it working. That's anchoring, first documented by psychologists Tversky and Kahneman, and it means the very first number you see quietly sets the frame for every judgment that follows, even when that number is completely made up. In one famous study, people spun a wheel rigged to land on a random number, then were asked to guess what percentage of the United Nations is made up of African countries. Their guesses shifted based on the random number they'd just seen, a number with nothing whatsoever to do with the question. Your brain doesn't build value from scratch every time. It adjusts from whatever number is standing closest. What separates this from smart comparison shopping is that the anchor doesn't need to be true or even relevant to work. It just needs to land first. Salespeople have known this for decades. So has every person who's ever named a number first in a negotiation.
Spotlight effect. You trip slightly on a curb in public, or say something a little clumsy in a meeting, and for the rest of the day you're convinced everyone saw it and is still quietly thinking about it. In reality, most people didn't even register it, and the few who did forgot within minutes. That's the spotlight effect, our tendency to wildly overestimate how much other people notice and remember about us. Researchers proved this by sending a student into a room of strangers wearing an embarrassing t-shirt, then asking both the student and the strangers to guess how many people noticed. The student's estimate was almost always double the real number. The leading explanation is that you live at the center of your own experience every single moment of every day, so it's easy to assume you're just essential to everyone else's, when really everyone else is too busy managing their own imaginary spotlight to notice yours. What makes this different from ordinary self-consciousness is that it's less about how you actually look and more about a basic miscalculation of how much spare attention other people even have. It's a strangely relieving thing to understand once it clicks. Almost nobody is watching you nearly as closely as you're watching yourself.
Dunning-Kruger Effect. You pick up a new hobby, and for about 2 weeks, you are unstoppable. You watched a few videos, you got the basics down, and now you're mentally drafting the speech you'll give at your first competition. You're better than most people already, obviously. Then, a month in, reality shows up uninvited, and it turns out you weren't even close to good. You just didn't know enough yet to see how far away good actually was. That gap between confidence and competence has a name: the Dunning-Kruger Effect, discovered by 2 researchers who found that the least skilled people often rate themselves the highest, not out of arrogance, but because the very skills required to be good at something are the same skills required to notice you're bad at it. It's not a personality flaw, it's a blind spot that hides itself. What makes it different from plain overconfidence is that it isn't emotional, it's structural. It happens to cautious, humble people just as often as loud ones. And here's the part nobody expects. As people actually get better, their confidence usually drops, because now they can finally see the size of the mountain they're standing on. The most self-aware people in any room are often the quietest ones. They've simply seen enough to know how much they haven't. Barnum Effect. You take one of those 2-minute personality quizzes online, the kind that spits out a paragraph about who you are, and it feels unnervingly accurate. It says you're outgoing but need alone time to recharge, that you're sometimes too hard on yourself, that you have untapped potential nobody's noticed yet. You nod along like it read your diary. It didn't. That eerie sense of being personally seen by a generic paragraph is the Barnum Effect, named after the showman P.T. Barnum, who understood long before psychologists did that vague statements feel specific when you're the one filling in the blanks. Researchers actually tested this by giving an entire room of people the exact same personalized reading, and almost everyone rated it as scarily accurate to them individually. Your brain isn't being fooled here so much as doing what it always does, matching patterns to your own life, because that feels better than admitting the description was written to fit anyone. What separates it from flawdery is that it works even when the description includes a flaw, because the flaw feels observed, not guessed. It's a mirror dressed up as a message, and it will always show you exactly what you brought to it. IKEA Effect. You build a bookshelf yourself, and it comes out slightly crooked. One shelf a little uneven, screws visible where they probably shouldn't be. A professional carpenter would wince. You love it anyway, more than you'd love a flawless one from a store. That irrational attachment is called the IKEA Effect, named fittingly after the furniture company that's tested millions of us on this without asking permission. Researchers ran the actual experiment, having people build furniture and fold origami, then asking them to price their own wobbly creations against professionally made ones. People consistently overvalued their own work, sometimes by a lot. The leading explanation is that effort quietly becomes evidence. Your brain assumes something must be worth something if you sweat it over it. Otherwise, why would you have bothered? What makes this different from simple pride is that it isn't really about the outcome looking good. It's about ownership, the flaws included. It's one of the more forgiving biases out there, honestly. It means the hours you spend building something clumsy are never fully wasted, because at the very least, they turn that lopsided shelf into something no store-bought version could ever be: yours. Availability heuristic. A plane crash makes the news, and for the next few weeks, flying feels riskier than it did before, even though the actual statistics haven't shifted at all. Meanwhile, you'll get in a car without thinking twice, despite driving being, by nearly every measure, far more dangerous. That's the availability heuristic, another one from Tversky and Kahneman, and it means we judge how likely something is by how easily examples come to mind, not by the real numbers. Vivid, emotional, recent events are simply easier to recall, so your brain quietly mistakes ease of recall for actual frequency. This isn't foolishness, it's efficiency. Calculating true statistical risk for every decision of your day would be exhausting, so your brain reaches for a shortcut instead. What makes it different from simply staying informed is that knowing the real statistics doesn't fix it, because the feeling was never coming from the statistics in the first place. It's why rare, dramatic things feel far more common than they are, and quiet, ordinary risks feel almost invisible. Your internal sense of danger wasn't built to read a spreadsheet. It was built to remember whatever scared you most recently.
Zeigarnik Effect. An email sits half-written. A show gets paused mid-scene. A text conversation ends mid-thought because someone had to go. And somehow that half-finished thing nags at you all day, in a way fully finished things never do. That's the Zeigarnik Effect, named after psychologist Bluma Zeigarnik, who noticed waiters could recite complicated, unpaid orders in perfect detail, then forget them completely the second the bill was settled. She found that unfinished tasks create a low hum of mental tension that closed ones simply don't. Your brain treats an open loop as unresolved business and won't fully let it go. It's part of why to-do lists actually work, not because writing something down helps you remember it, but because it gives your brain somewhere to set the tension down. What makes this different from plain forgetfulness is that the task doesn't need to matter to bother you. It just needs to be incomplete. A half-sent text can occupy more of your mind than an entire finished project. There's a strange fairness in that if you think about it. Your brain doesn't measure how big the task is. It only checks whether the door was left open.
Confirmation bias. You land on an opinion about a person, a diet, a political stance, and from that moment on, you keep noticing everything that agrees with you and gliding right past everything that doesn't. It doesn't feel like you're doing this. It feels like the world just keeps happening to prove you right. That's confirmation bias, one of the most tested effects in all of psychology. Our tendency to seek, interpret, and remember information in ways that back up what we already believe. Contradicting evidence doesn't vanish. Your brain just quietly discounts it, finds a reason it doesn't really count, while anything that agrees gets waved through with barely a glance. It's why two people can watch the exact same event and walk away with completely opposite and completely sincere versions of what happened. What separates it from just holding strong opinions is that it works upstream of reasoning. It shapes what you even notice before you get anywhere near thinking about it. Nobody's exempt. Not smart people, not skeptics, not people who take pride in being open-minded. The bias doesn't check your resume. It only checks what you already believed on the way in.